Hello and welcome to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast by College Baseball Advisors. I'm your host, Wayne Mazzoni. My background is long time as a college baseball coach, current college baseball recruiting advisor. For more information about what I do, please visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. On today's podcast, we had Jim Martin, the new head baseball coach at Stony Brook on Long Island. Jim was the former associate head coach there when Matt Senk, longtime coach, retired. Jim took over the program. We talked about his background growing up in Norwood, playing hockey and baseball. His recruiting got him to play at St. John's for Coach Blankmeyer and Coach Scott Brown, who's at Vanderbilt now. He then started his coaching career. Actually, thought he would possibly be a high school teacher and coach, but his experience at St. John's kind of pushed him into the college ranks. He started his career coaching at St. Anselm with the great J.P. Pine, then took his next job at Southern Connecticut with the great Tim Shea, and then got the head coaching job at Merrimack. He was there for several years before he then went with Ralph Serrato to URI. Was there for 3 really successful years before leaving and going to Stony Brook as an assistant, and again now as the head coach. So we covered a lot about his coaching career, his recruiting process, a bit about the transfer piece, what he wants in his style as the head coach at Stony Brook, and it was a really informative podcast. Interestingly enough, Jim is speaking at the Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention coming up in January. Again, who's the sponsor of this podcast. Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention's been going on for 22 years. This will be its 23rd, January 15th to 17th at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut. A great lineup of coaches, great venue, great vendors, demo spaces, breakout rooms, just a really awesome event to get your baseball juices flowing. So for more information about that, please visit baseballcoachesclinic.com. And without further delay, here is my conversation with Jim Martin, head baseball coach at Stony Brook. All right, Jim. I'm so excited. I love doing this podcast, and I've said it probably 20 times in the podcast. I love in the modern world, we're all pulled in a million directions and got these crazy rectangle phones that distract us. To like lock in for a conversation with somebody is really very enjoyable. And you and I have known each other, quite a while, but at the same time, never really get much of a chance to get in depth like this. So first and foremost, I'm excited to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, same. Thanks again for reaching out and having me. It's been pretty cool to see all the amazing guests you've had on. So it's a pleasure to be here and talk to you for a little bit, and looking forward to it.
So I should have known when I texted you yesterday, because you can get all you need on people these days, but like there's not a lot of where someone was born and raised. And I should have known with the accent you still have, even though you're on Long Island now, that you're from Massachusetts. So you said you were born and raised in Norwood, Mass, right?
Yep, yeah, Norwood, Mass. Grew up there my whole life until I got to college. So that's really what I knew my whole life. That greater Boston area, and like I said, until I got to college. So my family still in Norwood, and yeah, I'm proud to say that I'm Norwood High School graduate, class of 2001, and yeah, I have a lot of pride for my hometown.
So this could be you. I'm gonna assume you fit into this. I grew up on Long Island where you are now, and it was like everyone was either Mets, Yankees, Jets, Giants. It was a battle on every team that you had. But it seems everyone from your neck of the woods is all in with, Patriots, Red Sox. Is that accurate? Were you in, still into all those teams?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no battling in Norway. It was Patriots, it was Bruins, Celtics, and Red Sox. I would say Red Sox more first than Patriots, but I would say even Patriots have kind of taken over. But yeah, there was no battle, and it was all Boston all the time.
And athletically, clearly everyone I get on here is a baseball person. Were you baseball only as a kid, or did you grow up playing everything?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily grow up playing everything, but I was a hockey player my whole life. My family, my dad played hockey at Boston College. He actually coached me in high school at Norwood High. My mom's family, they're all hockey players growing up. So there's a huge hockey. So even when I go back 25 years later, everyone's like, "Oh, you still skating?" And I haven't played hockey in 25 years, but that's just kind of how it was growing up. So it was winter hockey, all my hockey equipment, baseball stuff, kind of packed away. And then when March would come around, I'd put the hockey stuff away until, basically the fall, and I'd be playing baseball for the spring and summer. So, and then I played golf growing up, and I actually played golf in high school in the fall as a fall sport. So I played freshman football, but I also played my sophomore and junior year. I got humbled a little bit in football, so I went and played golf with all my hockey buddies for the next 3 years.
So that is interesting. I mean, there's definitely, over my career, the hockey, baseball guys that I've, coached or met with, there's some tough dudes, man. That there's definitely, it's not something, I mean, I grew up playing street hockey, which got pretty contentious, but it's not like being on the ice. I mean, there's definitely something about the toughness of a hockey kid playing baseball for sure, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think you said it. I take pride in it, but yeah, I think there's some truth to it for sure.
And I'm assuming over the years which we're going to go through your coaching career, I'm sure you've had a fair amount of hockey, baseball guys that you recruited. I'm guessing it's somewhat of a dying breed. Like any Stony Brook guys now play hockey that you know of in high school or growing
Um,
up?
yeah, just a couple. Yeah, just a couple. I think maybe the area that we're in, not as much high school hockey. I mean, hockey's prevalent with the Rangers and Islanders, and there's some players in the NHL, but I just think not as much. There's a couple on the team, but not as much maybe as in the past. But
Yeah. So what do you remember about being at Norwood High School and the recruiting process that got you to go to St. John's?
yeah, so it's kind of a unique circumstance. So I was a hockey baseball player. I actually was going to go to UMass Dartmouth in Massachusetts. I was going to play hockey and baseball. So I was going to play Division III hockey and baseball. And we're talking, like I said, 25 years ago. I actually didn't commit to St. John's until the spring of my senior year.
Hmm.
So I lived with my grandfather growing up, and my grandfather had a stroke. I went in to visit him in the hospital my senior year, and I was going to tell him, "Oh, I'm going to go to UMass Dartmouth," and he said, out of nowhere, he's like, "Hey, you should go to that school in New York." And a day later, I was like, "You know what? Yeah, I'm going to give Division I baseball a shot and see what happens." And I remember, calling Coach Blackmeyer and said, "Yeah, I'm going to go to St. John's." And that was in the spring of my senior year. I was like in the middle of my high school baseball season. And that's how I ended up. I was an education major and I had education. That was a cool opportunity for me to give it a shot. And that's how I ended up at St. John's.
So how did that offer, like, had he recruited you and offered at, and then you had previously said, "Hey, I'm going to go UMass Dartmouth," and then all of a
No,
sudden,
no,
no?
no. It's just like so back, like I said, when I was growing up, the Bay State games was huge. You had the Southeast, you had Metro, you had all the teams in Massachusetts. And I was on the Southeast, and one of the coaches at the time at St. John's saw me play. I went on a visit I think it was like February. They had just kind of got going with practice, and I went on a visit, stayed overnight. And then I was just kind of deciding. It wasn't any like rush or anything like that. And then, like I said, I was on the verge. I just kind of finished my high school hockey season, went well, and I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna want to keep playing both. And then I kind of flipped with what my grandfather told me, which is kind of a really cool story, and it was the best decision that I ever made. It set me up for the rest of my life.
So that is actually really cool. So, it's obviously tough to encapsulate a whole college career with one question, but this many years later, what do you remember about playing at St. John's?
Yeah, just the impact that my coaches had on me in such a positive way. Like I said, Coach Blackmeyer was a huge mentor of mine. I talked to him often and just always had my back and always was there for me. And like I said, I was an education major, so I thought actually I was going to be a high school coach and teacher. I was a secondary ed. And then Coach Hampton, who's now the head coach at St. John's, Coach Brown, who's the pitching coach at Vanderbilt, just the positive influences they had on me and my teammates. I was like, maybe I want to go into the college coaching. And Coach Hampton knew someone at St. Anselm College, JP Pine, and which led me to be a resident hall director, assistant baseball coach. But I mean, the biggest thing that I have as far as my years and my experience is just the positive influence that they had on me, not only on the field, obviously with the success of the team and me personally, but just the off the field and, education, community service, being great teammates, leadership. I just said to myself, wow, it's something that I think I would love to do and have an impact on college kids myself.
So a couple of things I hear in there. First of all, obviously Coach Blankmeyer's son Ty was a little guy probably running around who, with that was a scout, then coach. Now he's at Vandy, right? He's actually gonna be a guest here soon. So that's interesting. And then of course, right now you also had Scott Brown back then, who's also again at Vanderbilt now. So you had some really good coaches in that stretch there. The other piece was I always ask, but you already mentioned it. You went to college basically saying, "Hey, I'm going to teach and coach." Most of the people, or a lot of the people I have here, like they thought either they were going to play or do something else, and they got into coaching. But so would it be fair to say the experience with those coaches make kind of put you into the path of coaching college instead of working at high schools?
Yeah, definitely the path of coaching college. Like I said, growing up with my dad being a coach, my uncles on my mother's side, coached me in hockey. I always loved that aspect of it. So I wanted to be a teacher and a coach. I just didn't know what level I was going to be in. And then when I got to college, especially those last couple of years, my junior and senior year in 2004 and 2005, it was like, yeah, I would love to see myself being a college coach one day.
What was I know of? I forget what the year it was, but your whole time at St. John's, was that facility basically the same as it is now? Was that built while you were there? Was it not there? I can't really remember what year that facility kind of got an upgrade.
Yeah, the facility was there. I think it had been there for 1 or 2 years. It was a natural playing service when I was there. Now it's turf, but the infrastructure itself, the stadium and everything like that it was already in place.
Okay.
Yep.
So and then you mentioned so after college now these guys with with some help, you realized I'm going to coach college. It's time to get the college career going. I find it kind of interesting. JP is one of the funniest dudes in college coaching, right? So, who is now the coach at Amherst. First of all, what year was that at St. A's?
Yeah, that was right after I graduated college. So that was the end of the summer in 2005. So yeah,
Okay.
that was 2005, and then obviously the spring of 2006.
And I think the answer for this would be easy. You strike me as a guy that's always been mature and serious and focused. Like, was the transition to coaching pretty easy for you?
I mean, I don't think it was easy. I always remember, again, summer of 2005, JP's like, hey, listen, like, you're on staff, go recruit. And it was in August, and I went to a top 96 event when it was actually a true
Right.
recruiting event. And I remember saying to myself, leaving the house, I'm like, I was wearing like, like a Nike shirt and shorts. I'm like, I want to make sure I was dressed properly. And then just to see all the coaches that I had just played, against, and it was just, it was a cool experience, but one that I wouldn't say it was easy, but I think, like you said, I was just so focused and understood the importance of, not only recruiting, but being a professional and just doing the best that I could, even at a young age.
How long did you two coach together there?
Just 1 year.
Just 1 year.
Yep.
And I know from there you went to Southern, but did you leave or did he leave?
Both.
Oh, you
So
both, right. Okay,
yeah,
yes.
we were both resident hall directors and baseball coaches, which was awesome because I was on campus, got, housing, food, and then I was able to kind of treat the baseball almost like a, full time where I was always available to the guys, extra hitting, extra baseball. So I was always there, early morning lifts, due to the facility being available. So I was always there to help them. So that was cool. And then when they made an adjustment, so the resident hall director position was going to be full time. I mean, I could have stayed there and been the baseball coach, but ultimately led me to a great opportunity at Southern Connecticut due to my 1 year at St. A's.
Okay. So was there a connection to the Southern guys, or was it just, hey, this is a great opportunity to coach? How did that come about?
Yeah, it came about. Tim Shea's best friend, Steve Simos, was close to the Sullivan family from St. Anselm, who was there. They were very involved in the St. Anselm community. I had started, my 1 year, I did a golf tournament for a fundraiser for the program. They just saw my energy, my passion for coaching and for my players. and just kind of through Steve and Coach Shea. Coach Shea had an opening, and he brought me on campus and talked to me, and I ended up going to Southern Connecticut.
Steve Simos, first time Steve-O has been mentioned on the podcast. I don't know if you know this. So the year before I was at Sacred Heart, I coached at Holy Cross, and Steve is an assistant there. And I'll tell you one thing, that was for me personally a big wake up to like this guy was a high school coach, comes into college. He was incredible. I mean, that guy is a baseball wizard. At that point, Holy Cross was really not running on all cylinders to hire a guy like that, which, now they're a much better program, but excellent guy. So, and then of course, yes, that he's friends with Shay. You wound up staying at Southern for how long?
4 years. Yep. So I was there for 4 years. So I went into the fall of 2006, and then the fall of 2010, and then the middle of the fall is when I ended up going to Merrimack. But I was there 4 years.
And, I know this about Southern. Of course, I know Tim. Southern's not a place like where now you look at some of these, like if I look at the Clemson baseball coaching staff, there's like 90 guys on staff, right? At Southern, it was probably you and Tim, maybe a third guy. So I'm assuming Jim Martin had a whole lot of responsibility coaching at Southern Connecticut.
Yeah, it was awesome. It really was great. It was, for me to be with Coach Shea, and then my first year, like you said, we kind of had an assistant that was just there for a little bit in the spring, and then a cool another piece to kind of the coaching tree and guys that I've coached with. Nate Cole came on, who's now the pitching coach at Harvard.
Yep.
So Nate was our pitching coach. We were together our staff was together for 3 years. So that was awesome. But as far as like the responsibility, yeah, it was great. I helped out with all the academics. I helped out with all the fundraising, obviously the recruiting. So it was just a great opportunity.
And then, of course, that leads you to Merrimack, where you get the head coaching job. So start with the transition as your first head coaching gig, which now you have your next head coaching gig, which we'll get to. But was that a big learn? Like, as I could tell already, even though whatever these jobs were, you were all in on these jobs. So it wasn't like you went from a part-time coach to a full-time. You were already all in. Was there things you had to learn running the program, as the head guy for the first time?
Yeah, I think there's always adjustments. I was 27 years old, but it was an opportunity where I felt like, they were in the same conference as us at Southern Connecticut. They had some success that year in 2010. And I just thought due to the school's profile, growing a little bit, the area is really nice. Up north of Boston, I thought you could recruit a good player. As far as the transition itself, I think the biggest thing for me was just almost like in a way of delegating a little bit. And again, Nick Barisi was my pitching coach. He's the head coach now at UMass Lowell. So it's kind of cool to see so many great people that I've been able to coach with. And, but talk about a short staff, it was just really me and him and one of my former players, and then just kind of navigate, like it didn't pay much for either of us. So Nick got a place on campus, so he had a dorm. So that was really the biggest piece, is just kind of understanding and navigating and doing the best that we could with the limited amount of resources. But we did a really good job and did everything we could to be successful.
So I'm laughing on this podcast because this is like the Kevin Bacon 7 degrees of like everyone you've mentioned, I either know well but has been on here. Barisi, did he first play for you?
Yes, yeah, St. Anselm. He was a pitcher. He was actually injured that year that I
Yes.
coached.
So I
Yep.
don't know. Did you ever listen to the podcast I did with him?
I listened to a little bit of it. Yeah, yeah.
So
So
he
yeah,
basically, yes, he played football, baseball, but he said to me
exactly.
on that podcast, and this is a compliment to you. He goes, that year I was hurt. Basically, I sat next to Jim Martin in the dugout, and he goes, I basically had a baseball savant for a year that I learned from. So he,
Yeah.
and that was great. Like he really gave you a huge compliment, which is awesome. At that point, of course, at Merrimack, it's amazing how things change conferences and levels, right? Merrimack, Stonehill, everyone seems to be making that jump to D1. Um, when, how many years after you left Merrimack did they make that move?
I think it might have been 4 or 5. Yeah, there was discussions while I was there though.
There was,
Yeah,
okay,
there was
right.
discussions. The president really wanted to grow kind of the brand of Merrimack, grow the school itself. And that was a goal of theirs when I was there, even, up until, 2014. So I want to say it was maybe like 4 or 5 years later.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't want to sidetrack us, but it is interesting to see Division Two is in an interesting place, right? You see New Haven making the move, and like it's just, I don't know, it seems to be a shrinking level of college baseball. I mean, it's still around. Hopefully, here's what I know: there's a million kids playing baseball and not enough room for them. So
Yeah.
hopefully, college baseball programs only increase and not, these schools at least go to Division One and don't give up baseball. But um, the move from Merrimack was to URI. I'll ask you, but I'll assume was it you trying to get back to that Division One level or being at a place that was kind of all in on baseball?
Not necessarily. I mean, my wife was pregnant with our first kid. We loved Merrimack, we loved the area, but it was just an opportunity. Again, Ralph Serrato was the head coach at New Haven when I was at Southern Connecticut, so we had some good battles. When I was an assistant, and we had known each other not only from playing, but recruiting, so we knew each other. And then when he got elevated, he was looking for an assistant, and it just kind of, we talked a little bit, and that ultimately led me to Rhode Island. It was just a good opportunity to, kind of each spot led to, something a little bit bigger and a little bit better. So that was really just the biggest thing is to get an opportunity to coach Division One as the first assistant. Ultimately, ended up being the associate head coach, but there's a huge risk too, and that was a concern. But I had belief in myself and Raf and URI that we could flip it around because they had only won 13 games in that spring, and he was technically interim. So it was like one of those things. It's like, hey, let's go in, let's be ourselves, let's do everything we can to make it a great experience for the players, and ultimately we did, and had a pretty good run there.
Who did he take over for?
Jim Foster.
Oh, that's right. So that was when Foster went to Army.
No, that's when he went to Boston College.
Oh, we went to Boston. God, yeah, my God,
Yep.
it's I need like a cheat sheet for all this, right? But that's right.
Yep.
So Jim was there, and then Ralph got yeah. That's interesting because Ralph's been there so long now, right? So
Yeah.
when he was elevated, you were the guy that he took him with you, which obviously says a lot. He knew that, and you guys did a heck of a job there. Um, Again, at URI, you were ultimately there. How long?
3 years.
You were
So
there.
spring of, yeah. So spring of 15, 16, 17. 15, we had an awesome year. I ended up coming in second in the A10, which we were picked to finish last. Raf won coach of the year. We made it to the championship game. We lost to VCU, but it was an awesome year. And then the next year we won the regular season and won the A10 tournament, which was an amazing, amazing experience. And then even in 2017, we had a really good year. We came in second as well, in the A10. So yeah, we had a really good run.
And anytime, this is me, but anytime I hear someone getting coach of the year, I think like coaching staff of the year. Like there's a lot that goes into it. I'm sure you were a big piece of that, obviously turning that around. Had the hitting facility been built at that point?
Yeah, I was there.
It
Yep.
was there, yeah.
Yep.
Um, what's interesting is with URI, like that program has you guys for those 3 years. I mean, those are pretty incredible results you had over 3 years. Then, of course, you make the move right to Stony Brook was
Yep.
from there. Had you had a relationship with Coach Sank?
No, no, I hadn't had a relationship with Coach Sank, but kind of full circle. When Joe Panucci left to go to East Tennessee State, I had talked to Coach Hampton, who had known Joe, and he had known Coach Hampton, Coach Sank, and Coach Hampton is actually the one who kind of connected Joe Panucci with Coach Sank when he got the job at Stony Brook. So not only did Coach Hampton kind of initiate with Coach Sank, but also with JP Pine years ago. And then obviously, Coach Blankmeyer talked to Coach Sank, and then I spoke to Coach Sank, came on campus and met him, and talked about Stony Brook and everything like that. And then
Was that a similar move just in terms of like what the
um,
school, the facility, et cetera, to URI? Did you feel like it was a different environment or was it very similar?
it was different. It was different for a few reasons. one, Stony Brook kind of, obviously in 2012 they went to the College World Series. Um, you know, people, not that URI, but it's just different, right? Like basketball's the big sport of URI. In baseball, we had a ton of success, but the success of the baseball program and Coach Sank being here for so long, there was a feeling of, hey, maybe Stony Brook is a place where due to their success that you get, rewarded and the baseball is important. So, that was a little bit different, again, like I said, with Coach Sank being here and having the success and yeah, so it was a little bit different overall.
Yeah, it's funny because, I grew up on Long Island, graduated high school 87. Like Stony Brook was a D3, like had pretty good football then, but and he was obviously there forever. And to have that program go from D3 and make that transition, and then of course have that year in 2012, which was merely one of my most enjoyable. I mean, I was coaching at Sacred Heart. We were in a regional that year. Um, but to watch, I'll never forget watching the series at LSU in the Super when they win. And it was just one of the, I mean, listen, that team was not a fluke. That team, those guys recruited and gelled a ridiculous team.
Yeah.
Boy, was it a fun ride to be a fan, even though I was working in college baseball, to be a fan of that team. Do you remember that like experience as a baseball fan watching that team?
Yes. Yeah, I do. I remember texting some guys because St. John's was in the Super Regional too. They were in Arizona, who ultimately ended up winning the College World Series that year. But I remember watching the Stony Brook and they just like their at bats, they never struck out. They always put the ball in play. Then they'd hit home runs and then they'd get strike. It was just unbelievable to watch. And I remember, a group of the guys that I play with was like, I think Stony Brook's going to win the national championship
Right.
just because they did everything great in that, obviously that year they had the most wins in the country. And like you said, it wasn't a fluke, but then
No.
to see them go and do that to LSU, it was like, yeah, I think they got a shot to win it. And ultimately, obviously, when you get to the final eight, everyone's got a shot in Omaha. But yeah, that was an impressive team to watch. Yeah, I do remember it.
And do you see in the time that you've been at Stony Brook, do any of those guys, I'm assuming, come back and still are active with the program?
Yeah, so it's actually kind of cool. Me and Coach Sank are going to go up to Travis Jankowski's Cape Cod Hall of Fame induction
Awesome.
here, yeah, over the next few days. So we're going to head up and see him and get inducted into the Hall of Fame. We have Pat Canwell on campus. We invited him over to a practice last month. Yeah, a lot of guys are still in touch. Not only that, but the alumni base is so strong and so prideful of the baseball program of the university, and something that I want to continue to not only build off of, but re-engage with the alumni. Just because there's no kind of connection, right, with Coach Sank.
Right. The Jankowski was one heck of a player. I mean, is he still in the big leagues? I know he's been bouncing
Yeah, he's
around
bouncing
teams.
around. Yeah,
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 but
yeah.
he's still lasting, and this is quite a few years later. Campbell was tough as nails. James Campbell was on that team, who is a
Yes.
Connecticut
Yep.
guy.
Yep.
Tyler Johnson. I mean, it was just a really cool team. All right, let's get back to you now. So then, this past off season, Coach Sank retires after a ridiculous career, and you get the head coaching job, which so happy for you. I mean,
Thanks.
you've put if there's a man that's put in his dues and hustled and worked his ass off, and that's I don't like to curse on the podcast, but asses I guess is all right. You earned it, so I'm so happy for you. Um, Obviously, this will be the first spring coming up. Has the transition been difficult, easy? What would you say about the first few months of running the program now?
Yeah, no, thanks for saying all that. I appreciate that. And like you said, we've known each other a long time, which is really cool. So for you to say that, I appreciate that. As far as the transition, yeah, I mean, it's obviously, it has its challenges right now. I'm the one that's initiating, maybe the meetings or the ideas and ultimately it's my final decision and, take my coaching staff's, what their thoughts are and then, formulate my own opinion and what I think is best for the program. But, as far as the cool thing is with Coach Sank, he basically was able to let me do many of those things as far as, hey coach, I think we need to change the lineup. And he'd be like, all right, what do you want? And then I'd tell him what I want. In the fall, hey coach, practice planning, practice schedule. He was so open, and as long as I gave him reasons why we thought it was best, for the most part, he would always kind of go with it, which is amazing. For someone that was never an assistant coach, for him to be able to delegate the way that he delegated
Right.
really let me kind of learn from that end. And, sometimes, a lot of times, maybe it wasn't the best idea to change the lineup or whatever, or a practice plan or practice schedule, but he always wanted to know why and the reasoning behind it. And I usually, always had those reasons. So for him to be able to do that, like I want to do that with my staff, and I feel like we're doing that as a staff right now. So, I think being a head coach with limited staff, limited resources at Merrimack really helped me, set me up for this position now that I've been working, really my whole career for. So, yeah, there's always difficult days and times and decisions, and I'm sure like I was saying to my wife the other day, like we haven't even played a game yet, but it's been really cool to see my staff and the players and kind of the impact we're having on and off the field at Stony Brook. But yeah, maybe I'll have a little bit of a different answer for you when, in the middle of the spring, if we're going through a little bit of a tough stretch and, we got to try to figure some other things out to help us put ourselves in the best position to win. But yeah, right now it's been a really good transition.
Yeah, I mean, I follow the social media stuff, and it certainly seems like you guys are in the community and you have alumni coming back. Like, it's not like you're starting anew. You're just basically picking up. It's pretty seems like from the outside a pretty seamless transition. Let's talk about a couple of specific things to you and the program now. Um, do you have a specific thing you looking for in the recruiting process? I mean, clearly, I think most baseball people can tell if there's 10 kids, who are the best one or two out of that group. But is there something that Jim Martin values in a player, maybe more than other coaches, whether it might be speed or toughness or utility or whatever it might be? Is there anything that you kind of look for in recruiting?
Yeah, I think the first thing is the type of person, right? It's all about relationships. I mean, as well as I do, coaching and recruiting, and having the success that you've had, and I'm sure talking to all the other coaches, it's about the people and the relationships. Very rarely, and again, it happens, but very rarely is it going to be just a blind recruit that I know nothing about. I don't know any travel ball coach, high school coach, a guy I played with in college with, or someone that knows me that played with. So it's really about relationships and the people that not only they know, but I know. So it's got to be about the people first. It's got to be that they have to come in, and when they're playing for me, they understand, one, what they're getting into, not only baseball, but like you said, community, academically, but also, I got to make sure that, that they're the right fit for us. So it kind of goes both in, again, from what they're looking for, what we're looking for, but it's got to be the right fit from a personality standpoint and the person. And then really it's about, again, just like anything else, it's about talent and identifying the talent. What is, what are we, we different than other programs? I mean, the cool thing that I was able to do when I was going through the transition and this process of convincing and letting people know that, why I should be the next head coach. I think you said it, anyone can go to the field and say, my mother, who, she could go to the field and say, oh, he's a really good player. But one, that's great, but can you identify the player that maybe doesn't stand out the best, that's going to fit for your program and why? And then two, from a recruiting standpoint, I just talked about relationships. How do you get that player to convince them to say, okay, Stony Brook's the best place for them? Best
Right.
place for them from a baseball standpoint, winning, developing, academically, what kind of experience that they're going to have playing for me and my staff. So, that's really the other piece too, is the recruiting and really letting them know why Stony Brook's the best place for them. So, I'm not sure if I actually answered your question, but
Yeah.
the relationship piece is big for me and for us, the trust, and then obviously, like I said, the understanding and the recruiting process of what we're looking for, what you're getting into, and then convincing them in a positive way of why they should be playing for us.
Yeah, I think, on my side where I help kids with the recruiting process, I always tell them, hey, do your diligence. Talk to some kids on the team, man. Like I could tell you a guy is a great coach because he's a friend of mine, but I didn't play for him. So I think the players, the ones that are living that are the best ones to sell the program, right? And I think that's where you'll do really well when they're talking, say, hey, are you happy at Stony Brook playing baseball? I think they're going to get a resounding yes. And ultimately that's huge. I mean, of course, the coach has to identify and recruit the player, but to make a final decision, I think those are things that kids are looking at. This next question, feel free to not get into detail with it, but obviously college baseball is in a huge transition. All of college sports, you have the opt-ins, the opt-outs, NIL, all this stuff. Um, how much over the last few years of this change has that affected the way Stony Brook recruits, has a roster, runs the business that you are of running a baseball program?
Yeah, I mean, the only biggest difference, and I say this because, it changes, right? Like you always want to make sure, from a roster standpoint, you're managing it accordingly and you have the right amount of guys positionally and pitching wise. But, we're saying, oh, we want to, bring the freshman recruits down a little bit. And then, we have, 10 guys that are going to sign with us this week. So, we said we're going to go in like 6 to 8, and then it's like, I think he can help us. We see some potential in him. We love the kid, we love the family. So, we add a couple, and it's a good thing from a competition standpoint. But that would really be the only biggest change that we've made is maybe instead of 12 to 14, now we're looking at, like I said, like 8 to 10 at the most. So, two to four guys in a recruiting cycle from a freshman standpoint, just because, the last thing that we want to do, and we've talked about it, and again, it can help us too. I mean, we have, numerous examples where it's not like, hey, we don't want you anymore. You cut, you gone, see you later. We want to help them too. Like if it's not working out here, they want to play, right? So,
Right.
we help them to get to another college and play. But that's the last thing we want to do is kind of be, way over our numbers. But I would just say the biggest thing is, the freshmen, not as early because of the rule. So kids aren't committing as early. That's just the rule. And
Yep.
then two is just the overall number of freshmen that you're bringing in, just to try to keep that for the transfers, whether it be JUCOs or portal guys.
So how about this? This is, and I think I get it, but I always find this interesting. So you just said prior to all the transfer portal, you would probably be bringing in larger freshman classes, correct, from high school?
Yeah, yeah,
Right. Okay, which is mo everybody would do.
yeah.
So I guess my question would be, and this would be to everyone, but you're on the Zoom now, so you'll be the one that answers it. It's like I would assume at the end of each season, you'll find out that two or three players, maybe four, are leaving. This is every program. Players leave that maybe weren't expected. So those players that are leaving, are you generally replacing departed players with transfers coming in, or do you say, hey, we lost, this junior catcher, let's go find another high school guy? Like, how do you view that when you lose guys that you didn't expect to? Do you go get an extra high school guy, or do you say, hey, we got to replenish him for this coming fall, for next season, we got to replace him with a transfer guy?
Yeah, we would try to, I mean, if you, like you said, a junior catcher, we would try to get an older catcher just to try to, that experience.
And
I don't necessarily say we would try to replace a junior catcher with a younger kid that's say 18, we would try to replace him with someone kind of the similar age.
okay. And oh, I was just had a good question. I forgot. Oh, yes, here it is. Um, I tell people this, maybe you'll agree, that for a kid looking to transfer, I'm not talking about a kid leaving Stony Brook. I'm talking some general kid that might contact me and say, I'm at this school, can you help me? I respond and say this. Transferring is either absolutely torture and it's going to be miserable, or it's going to be very easy. So what I mean by that, I think maybe you know where I'm going, is if some kid goes to Marist and he has gotten four at bats and he's 0 for 4 with his two strikeouts and he puts in the portal, I'm assuming Jim Martin's not going to be all over him because he's got no video, he's got no, unless you somehow knew the kid in the recruiting process or something. If the kid decides to leave Marist after his junior year and he hit 375 with 12 jacks and he stole 25 bags, his transfer process is going to be easy. Is that an oversimplification of kids leaving? It's either really hard because you don't have anything to back it up, or easy because you have proven you could do it.
No, that's not an simplification at all. And you said it too, because I was going to bring it up, but yeah, the only asterisk would just be a prior relationship. A kid that was at that school, he wasn't playing, and it's like, oh, he's on the portal. Let's try to bring him to Stony Brook because we recruited him out of high school. And I've
Right.
had some guys like that are here right now that maybe went to some bigger schools. The Power Four, Power Five schools, and we recruited them. It didn't work out, and then even though they got limited to no playing time, they've been able to come to Stony Brook and have some success.
Yeah, I mean, I did that in my years at Sacred Heart where I would lose a guy to a UConn and I'd say, I get it. Great coaching staff, great program, great school. Listen, if it doesn't work, I'd like you to give me a buzz first. And those guys would come in, and even though that, like you said, they had no numbers, I knew these guys could do it. And they, you're right. But otherwise, them convincing other schools that don't know them, it's going to be really difficult when you don't have that track record. All right, two more things for you. Now, again, that this could be something in the way you've always coached, or now an imprint you want to make as the head coach here. Is there any characteristics that you try to like bring out in your team, whether it's through practice, through games? Like I think of Jim Martin, I think of a smart baseball guy, and I think of toughness. Is that things that you want to have your program have, and therefore maybe it's the way you run a practice to increase those things?
Yeah, no, that's yeah, I love that. If everyone thought of me in the program like that, that'd be awesome. I would definitely sign up for that. We talk about practices, putting the pressure on our players, at a very high level, in the practice setting. So we say practices are for the coaches, games are for the players.
Mhm.
It's a very simple way to put it. We're going to make you uncomfortable. We're going to get you better. That's the way that we feel that's a piece of the player development as a team. So, what we want our players to have their reputation and moving forward is we're very energetic and we are on the attack. So when you play us, we're going to have a ton of energy and enthusiasm, and we're going to be on the attack. So we want pitchers attacking the zone. We want defense, playing defense, diving, jumping, making the routine play, but we're on the attack. Offensively, we're on the attack, whether it be hitting, bunting, running, taking the extra base. Those would be the characteristics that not only that we go over almost daily in our program, but that's one that, when we start playing in February and, like you said, the reputation trademark, those would be energy, enthusiasm, and, we're on the attack.
And I would imagine back to recruiting, that's something you probably look for too. When you see a pitcher with good stuff, but going after people, and a guy laying out for stuff, and a guy that's offensively can bunt and he's aggressive, like if that's the way you want to play, I'm assuming that's the style of, of recruit that you'd want. I did say one more, but I'm going to ask you a quick other one because I try to impress this on the kids that I work with. Um, I try to tell them that if they want to rise above other kids in the recruiting process as an offensive player, they absolutely should learn to base hit bunt if they run, right? So if their middle guy is center fielder, if they run and they show that they can legitimately drop down a base hit bunt, it's a huge thing still in college. It doesn't happen in high school. We don't. It doesn't happen in travel ball. The big leagues, it maybe comes back in playoffs, but over the course of a season. For you in recruiting slash the way you coach the team, is bunting a big piece of it?
Yeah, so last year, our offense, we had a really good offense, and it was great to see. We could hit home runs, we could hit extra base hits, but when we needed to get a bunt down, we got the bunt down. So even though we maybe weren't able to hit the home run or hit the extra base hit, we were able to move runners. So, basically, it's a situation where it's like, oh, if they're taking one piece of our game away, we still have this piece to attack the opponent with. So as far as the recruiting process and what we talk about from an offensive standpoint, a couple things. One, if you're a guy that can run, and you're not a big, extra base hit, how do you get to second? You're going to run your way to second. So if that means putting a bunt down and getting on first, and now you're on second because you can steal. I mean, our goal from a base running standpoint is to have over 100 stolen bases. So, and then if you can hit extra base hits and you also can run the bases and steal bases, now we have the best of both worlds. So yeah, we want to make sure that, like you said, in the recruiting process, if a guy's not a guy that can hit extra base hits, but you know what, they can bunt and handle the bat, and they don't strike out, and they get on base, they can run their way to second base, and then a guy that has power and juice in the middle of the order hitter, awesome. But if they can run, now you get the best of both worlds. So
Yeah, you're right. And if you have a guy that can legitimately have extra base hits and bunt and run, he's a guy we call a prospect, and he gets scouts to come to the games because that's
yeah.
rare, but that's huge. All right, the last thing is really cool with this podcast. Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention's a sponsor. So I kind of asked this as like the final question, and I ask it in two ways. You answer it whichever way resonates. Is if you were to go back and tell your high school self at Norwood, something that you've now learned in your experience coaching that, man, you wish you would have done better, or just some general 15 or 16-year-old that you would say, hey, if you want to play college baseball at the highest level, these are one or two things you should be doing, in your routine or in your life as a younger player. Is there something that comes to mind?
I would just say, just to be as proactive as you possibly can. We talked about relationships in the beginning, in the middle. Surround yourself with people that you trust that are going to help you. But you have to take the initiative. I remember I had an English teacher, Mr. Paul. He, again, it wasn't emails, so we would do a letter and we would send it to the coaches and tell them why they should, recruit me and why I was a good player and a good student. But the biggest thing is you have to be proactive about it, and it's ultimately your career moving forward, baseball wise, yes, but also academically and socially. So, when you do send the email, make sure you tell them why you're sending it to Stony Brook. Like what's the connection with me or one of my members of my staff? What do you know about us? Make it brief, make it short. But you got to make sure that you got to make it personal. It doesn't have to be long. But if you know someone that knows us, make sure you put it in there. Make sure you let them know what year you are in high school. And then obviously why, you're a good fit for Stony Brook. And the more personal, the more relationship that you have, and you surround yourself with people that are going to help you get to Stony Brook or whatever college it is moving forward, you're the one that's taking the initiative, and you're doing everything that you can to do that. And then obviously, yes, you're sending an email and you're connecting with college coaches, but what are you actually doing to play college baseball? I mean, you said it. I mean, there's so many players, but there's not enough colleges. So what are you doing from a physical and mental standpoint to get yourself in a position to play at the next level? Because yeah, it is very difficult. But I would just say take initiative, make sure you surround yourself with people that are going to help you get to where you want to go, and that's really the biggest thing. And just don't be like a copy and paste email and everyone gets it, and really narrow it down, and really surround yourself with people that are going to help you, that you trust, and they have relationships with people that are going to help you.
I mean, you bring up a good point. Like if you got two similar emails, but one of them says, "Hey, I know so and so," or you could feel free to speak to so and so who knows about me, and it's someone that you have a relationship with, or one of the guys in your staff, that's going to move it ahead more than there's no connection whatsoever. Because you're right, it is and is always going to be a relationship business, and certainly in COVID when people weren't out recruiting, you used all connections, and I think that still carries over that knowing, and obviously you could go to a camp and see a kid that you don't know, but you still probably will follow up with his coaches to find out what kind of kid he is. But Jim, this has been awesome. I'm so happy for you. I'm psyched that Stony Brook's going to have a great year, and that you get to run the program, and that a Massachusetts native is there on Long Island, which is awesome. But thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This is awesome. And yeah, this is a great happy holidays to everyone. And yeah, thanks again for having me on.
You got it, buddy. All right, I'm going to end it now. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Game Plan Podcast by College Baseball Advisors. Again, I'd like to thank our sponsor, the World Baseball Coaches Convention event that takes place January 15th to 17th at the Mohegan Sun Casino in Connecticut. If you go to baseballcoachesclinic.com, you will see the list of speakers, the topics, the schedule, be able to register events, see about past speakers, etc. They do a tremendous job. For those that register, you also get videos of the event. So any session that you cannot make live, you will then get the videos of that event. So it's really awesome. Again, Jim Martin, who is our guest today, was on our podcast, is speaking at the Mohegan Sun Coaches Convention. Again, this is your host, Wayne Mazzoni. For more information about my recruiting business, please visit collegebaseballadvisor.com. And we'll see you next time when we have Mark Calvi, head baseball coach at South Alabama, joining us. Thank you.